always had coaches in sports, and I always got better with coaches in sports. But like you, I've always had mentors and really great friendships that have helped me live the life that I'm living, and I'm very grateful and happy for it. So I've always had good friends, good mentors. But I was curious to just test out this coaching thing as actually what it was.
Yeah.
And a friend, someone that I met actually while at BYU, he he said he was starting to do a coaching business, and I remember interacting with him while I was at BYU. He was older than I was, and I thought, gosh, this guy was really smart back then. I wonder what I could learn from him. And so it just started out with being curious, and I honestly didn't expect to get much out of it because I always thought I was quite self-aware, and it's really changed my life in really positive ways.
Startups with Stu is a podcast for anyone living or wanting to live the startup life, either as a founder or a team member. Your host, Stuart Draper, was a 9-time Inc. 5000 honoree before age 40. This show dives deep into the exhilarating world of entrepreneurship with guests that are seeking advice from Stu for their startup or business owners that want to share their entrepreneurial journey. Listeners always walk away with actionable ideas of what to do to take their startup to the moon. Startup life can feel like a roller coaster ride. And with Startups with Stu, you're likely to turn your roller coaster ride into a rocket ship ride. Get ready to uncover the secrets to startup success from visionary founders and savvy investors who've transformed groundbreaking ideas into thriving ventures.
On this episode today, folks, we have the one and only Bryan Coy of MedCart AR. Bryan, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and it's nice to meet you finally.
Yeah, it's good to meet in person. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a while. We're both education founders, and we're both simulation education founders. So, cool thing in common there. Different spaces, though. Bryan, tell us, what does MedCart do, in fact?
If you're not aware, in hospitals, there's these things called code blues. Code blues are called in a hospital when a patient is experiencing a critical condition, whether that's cardiac or respiratory. There could be other medical situations where that applies, but those are primarily the two of them. And so that's the first thing. And then and there's two other I want to mention. The second is crash carts. There's no national standard for crash carts. And that what I mean by that is there's no specific layout of medicine in these carts or supplies in these carts. So when these code blues are called, nurses have to go get these carts and bring them into the room. And they are
You
often
want to be prepared with you. It's because you want to be prepared, right, with everything that you need in one cart.
exact
Because the emergency's happening, you don't have time to go look in this closet for that and the other
right.
cabinet for the other. It just got to all be ready right there for the
Exactly.
doctors. And
Exactly. So there's no national standard for that layout, but there's a crash cart in every hospital, and oftentimes there's more than one. Because if you're not aware, this was very surprising to me, but every 2 minutes there's a adult having a cardiac or going into a code blue, and every
wow,
hour and a half there's a pediatric case happening where a pediatric child is, that's redundant, a child is experiencing a code blue. And so that
yeah,
happens every day. So every 2 minutes for an adult, every hour and a half for a kid. And so these nurses, they need to be prepared, and we just don't know when or where those code blues are going to happen. So that's where we come in as MedCart AR, is because there's no national standard, and there's lower familiarity and lower confidence with nurses because they're not always interacting with these code blues. So we take those physical crash carts, or a variety of medical carts. You could be also a malignant hypothermia or maternal hemorrhage, lots of other carts. But we take those cards and we put them in nurses' pockets so that they can get experience ahead of time before these codes.
so they go open their phone and they can see everything that's in a cardiac cart or a maternal hemorrhage cart, and they can be familiar with what they're going to see when they pull that cart out to go to work. Is that
Exactly.
right?
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
That is super cool technology. Obviously, there's a need for that. I think that a lot of your potential customers are probably going, well, my nurses went to college, right? My nurses know this
Right.
stuff. My nurses did clinicals. They know this stuff. They don't need, like, how do you overcome that objection?
Well, what I have found is the medical community and these nurses in particular, they're very receptive to learning more and eager to find ways to improve. And that's been very refreshing. And it's very
Yeah.
inspiring, actually. It gives me a lot of confidence knowing that if I go into a hospital, that by and large, these folks are really trying to improve the quality of life of their patients and their education.
Talk about a motivator, right? Knowing that people might die and it might be and you could have saved them. Like, that's a motivator to go learn, right? You're going to go.
But there are still challenges. And oftentimes these nurses, though, they get exposure to crash cart training when they first get hired during orientation. And they have what's called ACLS, advanced cardiac life support. And then there's a pediatric version. And then, so they do those, but that's every 2 years. So the training is very spaced out. And it's not, unless you're part of the Code Blue team, you're not really you're not practicing these things very often, these skills.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we have to talk about and be candid about. And by and large, these nursing teams are very receptive to that idea. So yeah, that I kind of forgot your question, but that's where I was going.
That's cool. Well, you're saving lives, right? Like, you're helping save lives in one way. And that, what a cool mission that becomes for MedCart.
It is, yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's step back, hit pause for a second here, because I'm interested in learning more. Tell me about, and I think others will be as well that are entrepreneurs. Tell me about Venture Studio.
I served a church mission 14 years ago, and I almost didn't go, but I did, and I was always planning to, but last minute, kind of got cold feet. But I went, and I'm so glad I did. I had wonderful experiences, and
Where'd you go?
I went to Fresno, California, in the
Okay, cool.
Spanish. Shout out to my Fresno peeps, my Exeter friends. But when I was there, I had a missionary companion who I've since stayed in touch with all these 14 years. And a year ago June, I was laid off from a big corporate job that I had, where I was managing a $400 million product line and really close to the customers, and hence why I'm sensitive to the customers. And when I got laid off, this old mission companion that's maintained that friendship with for 14 years, he called me and said, "Hey, Bryan, how are you doing?" I was like, "Yeah, actually, I'm great. I'm glad to be in the spot I am." And then he said, "I want to introduce you to a business I'm doing with medicine," because he's an emergency medicine doctor now. And when I met with him about that, he introduced me to some of his team. And one of those team members was working for this venture studio. And during that meeting that we had, it was like an hour long. It felt, I was just there to learn what they do. It turned into like an interview. And he said, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at this job that I have at this venture studio. Why don't you call me afterwards and we'll talk some more?" And so that's how I got introduced to the venture studio. And it's been a great ride since. But as far as venture studio goes, the purpose of this studio is to find technologies that are developed in universities or hospital systems that just don't know how to get to market or don't have the bandwidth to get it to market. And so they look for those opportunities, license that technologies, and then hire someone like me to actually get it to market and grow it, scale it.
Does MedCart AR then, if I'm understanding this right, they don't build their own, they're basically the platform where people are building, where people are reselling medical sims. Am I understanding that right?
I could have done a better job explaining that part of it. So this technology was developed. It's an app. You can download it right now. Actually, it's called MedCart AR in the App Store, Android or iPhone. And there's demos that people can experience it on. So that's where it was developed, was at OSF Healthcare. And I work very closely with that development team still. And what I do is I go out and I contact universities, nursing programs, hospitals, and see if they're interested in this product. And if they are, this development team that's great ends up developing or building up these carts and then providing a unique access code for those hospitals, schools, universities, and then they can go in and do the simulations within the app.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I was to summarize that in 15 seconds, is what MedCart AR does is we take medical carts from hospitals and we put them in your nurse's pockets
as a learning tool for getting familiar with it.
Exactly.
With what's in the cart. Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How long has the business been going now?
2021 is when it started with OSF Healthcare, but it was actually just licensed in the last 9-10 months or so by this Summit Venture Studios. So there's been a significant investment up front from the teams that developed it to get it to where it's at, because it's a fantastic functioning product. We have very big customers and great customers, partners. And so now that's where I'm at, is just building on what's already been there and moving forward.
How many team members are at MedCart?
Right now, it's just me doing the day-to-day stuff. I'm not smart enough to do the development of new carts, so I rely on that partnership I have with Kyle and his team over at OSF. But I let them do all that really hard stuff, and I talk to people.
Okay. And when you say you talk to people, what's the goal? What's the day-to-day life for you, Bryan, right now, as far as hustling this thing?
Well, it starts out with me waking up in the morning to make breakfast and lunch for my kids, and then I drive them to school. But when I'm back home and I'm working, it's I have a database that I work through on potential or ideal customers, and I do a lot of cold calling and I do a lot of emailing, but I mostly enjoy the cold calling, as weird as that sounds. And that's how I talk to people. Sometimes they're 2 minutes long, sometimes they're 45 minutes long, and then we just go on to future demos from there.
So that's where the rubber really meets the road, though, isn't it? Like getting out there, talking to potential customers, learning what they want and need, giving that feedback to the developers if it's something different than what you guys have to offer. Yeah. So the idea then for Summit Venture Studio is to gain traction with just you as the sales rep, basically, to start. And then as it succeeds, you're able to hire help and scale the team. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And that's what we've done really over the last 8 months, 7.5, 8 months, that we have done really well. I've met great partners and made some partnership agreements come through. And so now I'm at the point where I am able to start hiring some additional help for development or just additional sales teams.
Yeah. So would you say that you fell into entrepreneurship then?
Completely. Yeah. I was not interested in really anything except for playing sports as a kid and hanging out with my friends and being with my family. That's all I really understood. That's all I ever cared about. I did mow yards for 7 years every summer in Arizona, which is miserable, by the way.
Yeah.
But as far as falling into entrepreneurship, I did. I think I kind of always leaned that way, but never really knew how to do it. I just knew I didn't like being told what to do all the time by something arbitrary. So now that I'm in this position where I get to really listen to people and make a difference in their lives and their work, it's been really fulfilling.
Awesome. So cool. I love how different paths lead to entrepreneurship. As far as next steps go, like what are the milestones that you have in place? What are the goals here for the biz?
For me, it's to reach certain revenue targets so that I can raise more funding for this company. So I'm beginning to get to the fundraising stage, which is exciting. Also a little bit nerve-wracking. I've never done it before. So I'm having to figure that out at the same time as trying to make sure I'm meeting the needs of my customers, find new customers, and also fundraise. So it's been a fun experience.
Talk to me about uncovering enough. What does that mean to you?
Uncovering. Yeah, I always battled with whether it was athletics or when I finally got into academics or as a dad or a husband. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing well enough. Or financially, I don't have enough money to go do what I want to do and experience.
Yeah.
And I actually hired a coach and for that mental aspect of my life. And it turns out it was quite emotional. And so I thought it was just mental, but it's
Really?
emotional. And it really helped me because the question he posed to me was, "Hey, Bryan, so looking back, have you always had enough money?" I'm like, yeah, I've always had enough money. Like I had good experiences and never wanted for much. He's like, "Okay, well, did you have enough money now?" I was like, yeah, I do. It's like, so that stands to reason then, Bryan, that you will always have enough. And that conversation really just lifted a huge burden off me as the dad and husband, and then I've been able to apply it to other areas of enough as well. So like with work, sometimes I feel like I've not made enough phone calls, but
Yeah.
enough has always worked. And it's not like I'm complacent by any means, but it gives me a little more patience and grace with myself.
That's so important for founders. There's always a fire burning when you go home
Yeah.
because you just have so many things to get done and you really can't do it all today. And so I really like that. Talk to me more about hiring a coach.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, tell me more. Like, I'm fascinated by it. I've never done it. I've had a lot of mentors. I feel like I had really good examples in my life growing up, but I've never had a coach.
Yeah.
I've considered it, never done it. So tell me more about that.
So I always had coaches in sports, and I always got better with coaches in sports. But like you, I've always had mentors and really great friendships that have helped me live the life that I'm living, and I'm very grateful and happy for it. So I've always had good friends, good mentors. But I was curious to just test out this coaching thing as actually what it was.
Yeah.
And a friend, someone that I met actually while at BYU, he said he was starting to do a coaching business. And I remember interacting with him while I was at BYU. He was older than I was. And I thought, gosh, this guy was really smart back then. I wonder what I could learn from him. And so it just started out with being curious. And I honestly didn't expect to get much out of it because I always thought I was quite self-aware. And it's really changed my life in really positive ways. So I would
Cool.
recommend it.
Yeah, you're a fan. Okay. I like it. I think if for nothing else other than that lesson about uncovering enough, knowing what enough is for you and being okay with that's enough for today as a founder is so critical, right? Not a founder, I should say.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you kind of are
yeah,
a founder, but it's hard not to call it that, huh?
well, it is hard not to. In some ways, I do feel like I'm just in sales, but it ultimately all rests on my shoulders. And so in some ways, I do feel like a co-founder to this business because my skill sets are different than Kyle's and his OSF team. They're the development, but and they're great at building relationships, but their job is mostly development. And so my skill set is talking to people. So that's one of them, anyways. And so I feel like in that way I am a co-founder, and so I call myself a co-founder. I'm going to own that title.
There you go. So, what's been the hardest transition for you into this entrepreneur life?
I think for as much as I was figuring out personas in my previous life, figuring out ICPs and iterating on that over and over again just to make it more and more precise, that's actually been kind of hard. But then the second piece to that is just there's no one keeping me accountable. I mean, I do report to a board of directors, and they're very supportive and challenge me when I have those board meetings, and I think it's very healthy. But day to day, I don't have that manager looking over your shoulder. So it's on me to make this succeed or not. And that's a different experience.
What are your board meetings like? Is it mostly like when I picture that, I'm like, oh, it's probably like when I meet with a sales rep and they tell me how things are going with their sales territory.
It's similar. But then we get into that they're very supportive of me. I couldn't ask for a better situation. They're very much like, well, tell me about your sales, what's in your pipeline, what are your operational goals, what are your strategy goals, what are your product improvement goals, and then we just talk through how to make that either reprioritize or make timelines shorter so things happen faster.
Yeah. Bryan, what questions do you have for me as another entrepreneur in the simulation game? What questions do you have for me?
I was curious to know more about how you would recommend, and at what, maybe if there's a cadence you do this at, like where you just go in and you look at your ICP and that you've created, and maybe you have 5, 6, 7 of them. How do you go in and evaluate? Yeah, we're still on target with that one, or no, that one's not quite right. Like, how do you stay up to date on that and make it not such? For me, it's a big burden to go in and reevaluate that.
So, if I understand your question right, when you first the acronym you're using, ICP, what does ICP stand for?
Ideal customer profile. So your personas that of who you're trying to target and work with.
Our ideal customer persona. You know, this is something that, as I've talked with other entrepreneurs, I've learned is not very clear for very many businesses, what the ideal customer profile looks like. At Stu Kent, we had a digital marketing textbook and a digital marketing simulation that digital marketing professors would use. Right. So I could go and find every digital marketing professor or marketing professor that might teach digital marketing. And that was like the ideal customer profile. It was very clear, cut and dry for me who we were going for. It was easy to find how to get their contact information and reach out to them. And so for that business, it was very easy. And I didn't realize how much that helped our business early on. In the MedCart space, you have the universities that you can call on and the hospitals you can call on. And then there's different people that would potential customers that would be interested within that market.
Right.
I don't know that I have all the answers for you, although I think it's very important that you focus. Find an area where you can get some wins and then go, okay, how do I go get more of that win? How do I recreate this process I just went through that got me that win now with that audience over and over again? Does that answer your question, or am I missing the mark on what you're going for?
You're saying what it makes sense to me. It's maybe it's just my brain. It's just hard for me to set aside time and really think through that. Maybe that's what I needed to hear actually, was just focus on it more. And because I think I have kind of been ignoring it because it's a little disrupting.
Yeah. So I was talking to another founder, and before he became a founder, he was in sales, and he talked about how his territory went from 17 states with all the districts in every state of 17 states. He's like, it was so big. And then, but my best year was when I had Kansas City, Omaha, and one other city. I can't remember what he said, but his territory had shrunk so much. And that was the year he made the most money. And I said, wow, do you think it was because you had more ability to focus in? He goes, absolutely, 100%. So when you have you're one person with the territory being the world right now.
Yeah.
Right.
We focus on the U.S. right now, but yes, we could expand.
Theoretically, it could be the world. So, but the 50 states, right? How many hospitals are in 50 states?
Thousands, yeah.
Thousands, right? And then for you, your natural inclination as a salesperson is, who might buy today? Who might buy today? Where would they be? And I don't care if they're in Chicago or I don't care if they're in Florida, but it's like, well, that's right. But it might be really good to be focusing on generating leads from one state. By the way, do you have help generating leads? You mentioned cold earlier. Is it all 100% cold?
I have attended conferences where as a vendor, I have access to attendees, their information. So that and just cold calling is what I'm doing. Yeah. It's worked really, really well. Like one of
Yeah.
the largest partner I've made a partnership agreement with this year came from that one of those conferences I went to. And in fact,
Yeah.
I was talking to him there. We met. We talked on the phone prior to the conference, found out we were both going. So we met in person, and he and I were just talking for probably 30 minutes at the booth. And I brought from the venture studio, one of my friends and coworker, he came with me to kind of help me out because it was my first conference. He actually snapped a picture of me talking to this guy, and he's like, Bryan is legit closing a deal right now. I didn't think of it that way because I was just being very present with this guy. And lo and behold, like 4 months later, he's one of the best partners I could hope for.
That's awesome. Yeah. So conferences can be a great way to go and get in front of the right personas for you. Another thing, by the way, along the lines of what you're talking about having done with the conference, where you said, I got to be in front of all these people and got good leads from that. And then I got the list as a vendor for the contact information to go reach out to those people. Like if you take that list and find that there's a bunch of them in the New York, New Jersey area, right? Then you can say, hey, you mentioned another thing that, what I do is I talked to one of the guys in advance and then I met them in person at the conference. You don't have to have a conference in order to go meet them in person. So you say, hey, Dr. Johnson, I'm going to be in New York, Manhattan on this date. And I'd love to catch up in person with you while I'm there to review what we're doing at MedCart and get your feedback on it. And then you go to Newark and you find the doctors there that you want. And you say, I'm going to be in Newark. And you say the very next day. And all of a sudden you have all these places that you're going to be because they're going to tell you, yes, I could meet with you. And when they tell you yes, now all of a sudden you've got a business trip planned, right?
Yeah.
And those types of things have worked really well for me. Getting on a plane and not having a reason, like a big business has reasons, right? You have your reason to go to this conference and you're going to be around the area. Now you're going to go tell people I'm going to be in town, but you don't have to have a lot of reasons. You can make those up. I'm
so glad you said that. It just reminded me, actually, 2 of the jobs I got in my adult life were because I did that.
Oh, really?
That's awesome. I wanted to work for, and I wasn't from the area, but I did. I drove there. It was a couple hours away, and I got offers from both of those different companies. So
nice. Yeah, there you go.
To apply, that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah. One thing that I think is really cool as a takeaway from this call today, entrepreneurs listening, Bryan's main role that Venture Studios is choosing to have him do is sell. And there's a time in your business as a founder or an entrepreneur where the right thing for you to do is just go sell. You have to gain traction to help the business grow to the next level. It's so critical that you do that. And a lot of times we want to work on product. We want to focus on product. We want to focus on how we're going to do a better job with our new signage for our shop, whatever it may be. What is going to drive revenue? That matters most today, right now. Go figure that out. It's going to solve all your other problems. And when you go to sell, they're going to tell you the things that they wish you would do in order for them to be really interested in buying from you. And then you can go say, okay, I got to go focus on product, but it's because it's going to help me get a sale.
Right.
Driving revenues, focusing on that is important. The folks at Summit Venture Studios are obviously very smart to hire good folks like Bryan and say, Bryan, you're going to help us go get traction. You're going to help us go find partnerships. You're going to help us sell. Go make that happen. So I love it. I think that's a great takeaway from today's call.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. That's basically what they told me when they said, yes, we want you to work with us. Go get some.
Yeah, and it's like, if you deliver there, Bryan, you're not going to be the person that has to do the cold calling forever, right?
No, but I do actually kind of enjoy it. I think I'm weird.
Well, and you may find that entrepreneur is not for you, CEO is not for me. I don't care about that seat. What I care about is leading a sales team, and I'm going to help people. I'm going to train other people to be good cold callers too. Like
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, one cool thing about being the CEO is and liking cold calling is there's no one that tells you can't cold call. You can't go reach out to hustle new deals and opportunities. Like I think a founder that loses the excitement for finding something new that way is probably time for them to go find a different CEO.
Yeah, probably. Something I've enjoyed is being a co-founder and doing the selling is I also get to make the decisions on how this deal is going to work. So I can be very flexible with whoever I'm talking to make it work. And that's actually pretty fun too. It's because you find win-wins easier and a lot faster.
Well, any last final questions for me, Bryan?
How would you always make time for your family with all the different startups you've had? Because you've had many.
I think that you have to understand balance is not a time balance. It's a balance of
quality over quantity.
This is obviously not an easy answer because here I am stumbling on my words. But I found that there's times when I can't do 8 to 5 and succeed as a founder and entrepreneur. There's times when it takes being on the road for 2 weeks straight. There's times when it takes missing a baseball game because you really need to go close that deal. But because I've paid those prices and done those things, I've made it to way more baseball games than the average parent of my kids that play travel baseball. And you just don't, by the way, parents that feel guilty, this is a side note. If you're within the sound of my voice and your kid does travel baseball, or travel any sport, it's okay. You're not a bad parent if you miss one thing. When we were kids and we did sports, Little League gave you 16 games in the entire season. My kids play 50 plus games. Okay. It's okay. And a lot of them are on Fridays. They're during work. It's okay. You're not a bad parent. Don't feel bad missing some of those. It's like missing a practice at that point. They're playing 50 games. If you get to 20 or 30 of them, good for you. That's awesome. Don't feel like you have to be at every last thing for your kid to feel like you love them and support them. If you can, great. But there's a balance to be had here, right? And 50 games of baseball for your kid is a lot of baseball. It doesn't include the other 80 to 90 practices.
Right.
It's like half of the year is going to their sport. So I love my kids. I love getting to coach them. I've tried to put myself in a position as a business leader where I can say, hey, I'm taking this Friday off to go be at the tournament. And I do that most of the time.
Yeah.
Right. But early on, I paid a big price and made some good sacrifices that made it so I could. So I think for me, most of the time, I am an 8 to 5er when I can, because I do like to get home for family dinner. I do like to play with my kids before they have to go to bed and be able to say goodnight. But then because I do it that way, I know that means I have to go spend an hour or two catching up on emails to be ready for the next day.
Right.
And so that's the way that I tried to juggle that. Saturday mornings, my kids and wife don't want to wake up early. Great. That's another time I can make that sacrifice. I'll wake up early, get more work done, and then I get to still have Saturday and playtime with the fam. So different things, different ways for everyone. But I believe that if you take the time to play, you take the time to still do vacation as a founder that's still figuring it out and gaining traction. Because if you do, you'll come back energized and with a more creative mind than if you just try to go plow 100%, never looking out anywhere but on the success of the business.
I could feel that answer, that you have experience behind.
I'm passionate about that. Yeah, I know. I've been through all of it. And, my 30s to 40s, I worked so hard and missed some things I really wish I hadn't. But I don't have a lot of regrets because of where it's got me in life now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you, Stu. I had a good time. Best of luck.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on my show, Bryan. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can learn from your experience and what you're sharing here today. Guys, if you're in the medical space, you got to go check out MedCart. MedCart is in the fundraising period, so if you're interested in investing, MedCart is one that's going to go to the moon, especially with a guy like Bryan at the helm. So, Bryan, Thanks for being with me today. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. See ya.
Thanks for joining me on Startups with Stu. We have big goals to help millions of entrepreneurs. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to share it with someone else that needs to hear it, or leave a review. Remember, success is within reach for those who dare to dream big and take action. Until next time, keep pushing forward on your entrepreneurial journey.